I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Vicky Sokolik. She's calling in by Skype from Tampa, Florida. Before I ask her to give her presentation, I just want to tell the connection, okay? Have any of... Oh.
Let's turn it down.
He's supposed to turn it down. That's fine. When she talks, I will turn it, yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry about that. But have any of you read the book, The Hillbilly Elegy? So what happened is, in that book, if you remember, the student comes from the Kentucky hills and ends up at Yale Law School. And the first time after they graduate, they're on the way to graduation, and the law firms come to recruit from the school. I mean, the law firms come to recruit at the university, and they have this very fancy dinner. Do you remember that? And there's all the silverware laid out and everything, and the guy panics. He rushes off, excuses himself, goes to the bathroom, and calls his girlfriend and says, "What do I do?" And with this backdrop, I just want to introduce Vicky Sokolik's organization in Tampa, Florida, because when she brings these youth that she's going to tell you about, she really, takes a very holistic approach, and not only those kind of niceties in the, outside their world, which we are accustomed to, but they are not, but she'll tell you about all the other dimensions that are part of her program. That's what really got us excited about Vicky Sokolik's organization. It's called Starting Right Now. And if you are bothered by the comma, don't try to fight with her, because she ain't gonna give. Over to you, Vicky.
Hi, sorry I can't be there. We have had several events going on, and so my life's been a little bit hectic, but I'm happy to tell you about Starting Right Now. I'm going to start out with a story. So if you want to leave it on the first screen, you're great. She reeks of barbecue. She begins to explain her story, and I understand why. Tiana, a senior at Armwood High School, is interviewing for a spot in my nonprofit. My name is Vicky Sokolik, and I am the founder and executive director of Starting Right Now. Ty tells me that her mom and dad are both in and out of jail her whole life. And at 10 years old, she's placed with her grandmother, who is not excited to be raising her and is physically abusive. While living at her grandmother's, Ty gets molested by several family members, not one, several. Eventually, these years of abuse and neglect culminate when her father holds a gun to her head and demands sex. After that night, she runs away. She begins living in the back of a storeroom of the barbecue restaurant where she works. That's when I meet her. She has no mattress, no shower, no desk to do homework, no bus to school, and no parent to offer love and support. Sorry, someone dinged and it threw me off. So to reiterate, when I first meet her, Ty reeks of barbecue because she's a 17-year-old girl who has nowhere else to live, forced to a restaurant. Innovation contributes significantly to our results because we invest opportunities, resources, and attention to individual students indefinitely with the ultimate goal of making them self-sufficient. We are the only permanent housing solution offering holistic services, and we have created our own curriculum to address life skills that were not modeled at home or taught at school. We enroll her in our program, and we do transform her life. Through Starting Right Now, Ty has access to safe and stable housing, food stamps and Medicaid, academic support, one-on-one mentoring, life skills training. We propel Ty to USF with scholarships. She studies abroad in Italy, graduates with a BA, and is currently a 6th grade English teacher and happily married. We assist unaccompanied youth, students like Ty that are in high school, who are not with their parents or guardian and not eligible for foster care because they were not taken from their family, but rather chose to leave due to unlivable circumstances. This is a social issue that is an invisible national epidemic. Our impact is significant, and for more than 10 years, we have assisted more than 250 students with a 97% success rate. Our students graduate high school and either serve in the military, complete vocational training, or earn their bachelor's degree. We have a home in Hillsborough County that houses 40 youth and a home in Pinellas County that houses 50 youth. And we are in the middle of doing a proof of concept in North Carolina to prove that our program can scale across the country. Recently, Ty gave birth to a beautiful baby boy named Tyson. For so many reasons, Tyson's birth marks another benchmark for the efforts of starting right now. Tyson enters the world very differently than Tiana. He's born into a family with two devoted parents who are stable, fully employed, and financially literate. Tyson will never inherit the plight of homelessness and its associated traumas. In fact, quite the opposite. He'll grow up in a space where he's no longer victim to circumstance, but rather champion of his own life. He is proof that we are ending the cycle of poverty and homelessness. If you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Oh, sorry, the next slide. Okay. So an unaccompanied youth, to really explain it, is defined by the McKinney-Vento Act, the No Child Left Behind Act, that says that if you are not with a parent or guardian, then you are considered what's called an unaccompanied youth. If you have no stable housing, you are considered a homeless unaccompanied youth. If you go to the next slide. This is a flow chart y'all can look at to determine the eligibility of how you qualify as a homeless unaccompanied youth. Next slide. Foster care will not take these kids because they do not believe that their home life has been investigated and that they are eligible for foster care. And so the kids end up leaving on their own accord and really have no plan of where they're going to go or how they're going to take care of themselves. We say they start couch hopping, where they literally are asking a friend every night, can I sleep at your house? Sometimes they're on the street, sometimes they're in the park, sometimes they're on the bus ramp at school. Really, they have no plan of where they're going. It's dangerous. Next slide. These youth become homeless for different reasons, and you can look at the list. But the main reason is really from family dysfunction. And the student finally says, I just can't take this anymore. If I don't get out of here, I'll never get out of here. All of our kids are first generation high school graduates, first generation college bound. So they will be the first in their family to actually have an education. Next slide. In order to survive, they have to do things that they wouldn't necessarily want to do. Many of our kids have told us that they've traded sex for money, they have dealt drugs, they have stolen. We have a student that was in an international baccalaureate program a few years ago who was literally leaving school every day and having sex as a prostitute because she actually had no other choice but to sell her body to make money. And she had said to me, Miss Vicki, someone doesn't wake up and decide that they want to do this. They have to do it. She's now a senior in college and will never be homeless again. Next slide. So to survive, so they have trouble succeeding academically because when you are surviving, school takes a back seat. And so they fall behind academically. They act out in class, get referrals because they have so much anger. They have anxiety, thinking about where they're going to sleep and eat that night. They have never been modeled behavior, so they have no coping strategies or emotional intelligence, and they have a lot of shame. And when you have shame, you lose hope. Next slide. So surviving becomes a priority. And these are things that these kids do not have when they're actually looking for help. Next slide. We accept students that are 15 to 19 years old. They must be enrolled in high school. We are a referral source for the high school specifically. Anybody from the principal all the way down to the janitor can tell us that they have a student who they believe may be homeless. We come in, we do a 2-hour interview process to determine, are they really homeless? What really is their background? Why are they not with their parent? And then we do a backup to call around to make sure that their story actually vets out. And if they do, then they get accepted into our program. Next slide. We are holistic, as Sashi was explaining. We do everything from house them to feed them, to give them academic support, to give them a mentor, to give them life skills classes, and then to help them plan their future. And so a typical week would be Mondays and Wednesdays, they have to be with us for 3.5 hours after school to do a life skill class, which I'll talk about in a second. Tuesdays and Thursdays, they're doing academic tutoring. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they work in order to learn financial literacy. We help them open a checking and savings account and teach them how to budget with their earned income. And they have to meet with their mentor once a week. They have to talk to their mentor every single day. And then they have to be in our office either planning to go to the military, filling out vocational applications, or filling out college applications and filling out scholarship applications to make sure that they have money to actually go to their next goal. Next slide. We have developed our own curriculum. We call it the GRAD program. It's Gratitude, Rapport, Ambition, and Development. It covers, these are just a few things it covers, but it covers anger management, emotional intelligence, Dale Carnegie, mindfulness, meditation, etiquette, boundaries class. We believe that the bed is important. There's no question that a student needs stability in order to be stable and be able to go to their next step. However, you can give a student a bed, and if you don't give them the life skills to actually manage their anger and learn coping strategies and conflict resolution and learn to be mindful about their thoughts and actions, teach them how to trust again, teach them etiquette, they'll just be educated. They won't actually be able to assimilate fully into society. We want our kids to be as any other housed student would be that came from a home that was of a natural state. Next slide. So GRAD actually encompasses all of that. We take the kids who have only had this very narrow view and make sure that they can access every opportunity, including sporting events, including going to restaurants to learn how to order off a menu, literally tasting every type of ethnic food possible, because our kids will tell us, no, I don't like Chinese. But when you ask them, well, have you ever had Chinese? They have never had it. So they don't know what they like or dislike. They've never been to performing arts. We make sure that they do that as well. It's literally about opening up their view so that they can see what's actually available. Next slide. This is our logic model. Y'all can read to see why we use the things we use and how it works. I think the next slide is a logic model too. And next slide, please. Because our program has been able to actually have advocacy at the state level, we have changed 5 laws at the state level to help support these youth, because most people don't even realize they exist. There's an assumption they go to foster care. Other counties and states have actually requested our program. And so we have just developed a social enterprise where we will be selling our program to other counties to help end their youth homelessness in their area. It also helps us maintain our own program because there'll be a cost for them to actually replicate our program. And it will help us get regional and national grants because we'll be on a bigger scale. Next slide. And this is a testimonial for a student. So it's really my presentation. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
This is more of a comment. I think what you just went through is perhaps needed for every young person. Everyone. Not necessarily for those whom you're dealing with. So you're doing a great job, but that is perhaps needed for perhaps all of us.
Well, it's funny because there's a newspaper reporter here who I'm very close with, and he said he was going to kick his son out of his house and have him come do our program because we teach more life skills and they learn in his own home.
Hi, this is Stephanie, right? This sounds absolutely incredible. My question is, what happens to the siblings? Is there ever any steps to go into the home where these kids are coming from and help their siblings?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. We have a lot of sibling pairs. One will come in high school realizing that they need to get away. I'll give you a perfect example. We have a sibling pair right now whose mom and dad both died from overdose of alcoholism. And the brother came in first, really having nowhere to go, was a senior in high school, was going to have to move out of state in the middle of the year to his grandmother's house. And so we took him in, and the sister was with the grandmother, but the grandmother could not afford them. She was struggling to make ends meet. The sister was not going to reach her full potential. And so after the brother told us about it, we ended up taking her as well. They are both in college now, doing amazing, and they're both great students, they have a great future. The daughter, the sister especially does. She actually did her summer in Ecuador, and she's into environmental science, and now she's for 1 year actually doing a state abroad in Montana. So we do siblings. We do not go take anyone out of their home. I want to make that very clear. Kids are referred to us by the school district. Usually what will happen is the oldest will come, and then shortly behind we may get a referral for another one where they come forward. But we are not foster care. We don't go take kids out of their homes. We're a voluntary program. We're not even a group home. We are strictly transitional housing. The students have to come to us. We don't go take them.
Hi, Vicki. This is Margaret. I'm just wondering, hi there, how are you doing? I was wondering if you could comment a bit more on the selection process that you go through. I remember you telling us a very poignant story about having to select between two children that both desperately needed to be in your program. But I know that's very central to, the program that you have and the success rate. So I thought maybe it would be helpful if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, I'll actually share that story with everybody. It was either 2 or 3 years ago. We had 12 students interview for one bed. That's all we had left. We have since increased our capacity because of the story. But at the time, we had 12 students interviewing for one bed. We had got it down to 2. And I had actually just had neck surgery, so I could not go interview the kids, but the person that interviews with me had interviewed them and got it down to these 2 and said, why don't you go and figure out which one at the end of the day you're really going to want to work with, because I'm the one that works directly with them. And so I went to interview the last 2, and the first one walked in, and I said to her, I'm not going to make you go through the whole interview because our interview process is very elaborate. It takes anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours to actually interview a student to get to the raw meat of the story. And the first one, I said to her, just tell me in, a couple sentences, why can't you live at home? And she dropped her head and she said, my dad rapes me. And I said, have you ever told anyone? Now, keep in mind that 97% of my girls have been molested in their home, and 25% of our boys. This is a common theme, which is very sad. And I said, have you ever told anyone? And she said, yes, I reported it. They came out, they did a rape kit. There was no question. He definitely had raped me that morning. They pulled him out of the house. He went through a 90-day rehabilitation program. He's now back in the house. They consider the house safe. And so I know he's going to rape me again. I can't stay. The next student came in, and that student, by the way, was 18 years old and theoretically had shelter. It wasn't great shelter. She was being raped, but she had shelter. The next student walked in. She was 15 years old. She was with her aunt who had 4 little kids. Her parents were in Atlanta on the street, drug addicts, no way to find them. And she had been living with her aunt for about a year. The aunt's husband had walked out on them, and the aunt could not afford to pay for herself or for this student either. And the aunt said to me, I'm going to have to put her on the street. I'm going to a shelter and it's blood only. I have to show birth certificates. You know, which one do you take? Do you take the 18-year-old who you know is staying at home and getting raped probably every night? Or do you take the 15-year-old who's going to be on the street and really can't fend for herself? We ended up taking the 15-year-old. It's a horrible choice every day to decide which student you're going to take. But what we look for is, number one, resiliency. How many times have you been knocked down and still get back up on your feet? Because grit is a major qualifier for how well you will do in our program, because our program is not a handout, it's a hand up, and it's actually very difficult, probably more difficult than you've ever done before. So many rules, so many people telling you what to do, how to do, where to do it. The second qualifier is, do you have potential? If we give you this opportunity, are you going to use our resources and truly propel yourself to the next level? And that's kind of a gut thing where you have to look at that student. It's very difficult to assess it on their grades by the time we get them. It's very difficult to assess it on their attendance by the time we get them. Their test scores are usually horrible because they're hungry and they're tired. We had a student 2 years ago who had missed 100 days of school. She just couldn't get there. But she's now in college and doing amazing. And you have to be able to assess, are they really good students that are going to be able to reach their own potential? And it can't be the potential you think they have, but rather their own potential. And then the last thing is, will they follow the rules? Because we are a voluntary program, and if you don't want to follow our rules, you can't stay. And so there is a complete vetting process that happens. And the other thing is your story really true? We go back and vet your story. If you're a teenage girl who just doesn't want to follow your mom's rules, you're not going to last a day in our program, because one of our kids actually recently got back from boot camp, and one of the board members said to him, Philip, how was boot camp? And he said, after Miss Vicky, a breeze. So this is not a free-for-all. It's not a handout. It's probably more rules than you've ever had in your life. And it is about making sure that you end the cycle of homelessness. We stay with our kids indefinitely. They can access our resources no matter what level they are and their education. And so I want to make sure that we're taking students who are truly going to take advantage of this opportunity and not take advantage of us.
So, go ahead.
So I had 2 questions. The first is, are all the children from very poor families? Number one. And the number 2 question I have is that, do you try, I understand, a child cannot go back to where she was raped, but do you try for a patch up where it is possible?
So we do refer kids to other programs when possible. In her case, we did refer her back to a DCF program. The problem is that most transitional housing is only 14 to 28 days. And so I'm not sure what happens to the student on the 29th day, which makes absolutely no sense to me, but that's the way programs work. We're the only permanent housing solution. But we do try to refer. We actually went back and took that student who was being raped as soon as we had an opening from a college student that left to go to summer school. So we do keep track of them and try to figure out if we can help them down the road. To answer your question, I would say 99% of our students are extreme poverty. Things that you would see in third world countries that you should not be seeing in the United States are actually going on here. We have a student who's in our program right now who at 17 was the sole provider for her family of 4. And the mom brought a new baby into the home. And the student had like this aha moment of, oh my God, we have no electricity. We have no plumbing. How is this baby going to survive in this environment? And started calling Child Protective Services on her mother, who put 1 million requests for them to get, they gave them deadlines to get electricity, to get plumbing. Her entire family was going to the bathroom in the yard. It's ridiculous. After 6 months, when they still were doing nothing about it, she said, I got to get out of here. I'm never going to get out of here. I'm going to end up raising this baby and I'm going to remain in poverty. And so she left. So 99% of our families are in extreme poverty. There is 1% who are working class. We have a very strange story of a student whose mother was actually an MD, but got addicted to drugs and all of a sudden couldn't take care of her child anymore. We have another student whose mom is a paralegal and just chose a boyfriend over the student, left the student home alone for 2 years in an apartment. The manager finally figured out the student at 17 was alone and said, you can't live here alone. And it got reported to the school. And then we came in. But the mom was a paralegal. I mean, completely working, nothing odd or funny, and the apartment was nice. And the student was working 3 jobs in addition to going to school to pay the rent and was barely making it to school because she was exhausted.
Vicky, this is Shashi again. When we came to see you, you were just thinking about this social enterprise. And since then, I guess you have actually made it happen. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because yesterday, as we were talking about the various organizations, we were talking about capacity building. And I think if you could share how this idea germinated to begin with, because it's a great way to build capacity, right? How this germinated and what kind of pricing system or pricing basis did you come up with, and who are the potential clients for your social enterprise?
Sure. So it came about originally because when we were doing these state laws and all these House of Representatives and senators were hearing about our program, and we're privately funded, so we're obviously, we look really good to them. We're not asking for any government funding. Every county started calling saying, we really want your program. And so we had looked at going into Pasco County, which is an adjacent county to Hillsborough. And we were actually going to do it without doing a social enterprise, just go into that county and working with them. They had identified property. They had come up with funding. They had their mayor and their school board on board with it. And we thought it was great. We were about to go to pull the trigger and go forward with that. And then all of a sudden the superintendent from Pinellas County called us and said, whoa, wait, look at the numbers. We are 3rd in the country for unaccompanied youth. We need your program here. And so I had said to him, well, if you can show us how we would pull it off in Pinellas, we need the mayor, we need you, We need an actual building that we could make into housing. Within a week, he came back with the entire plan. We took over an old schoolhouse. We had a builder that put $1.2 million into it. We didn't pay a penny to renovate the entire site. It's actually beautiful. And in the meantime, Pasco was a little bit upset with us that we had gone to Pinellas instead of Pasco when they had approached us first. And then on top of that, Miami-Dade started calling us, and Dade County was calling us. And it was just like one county after another was calling us saying, we really want your program. And so we started thinking, we can't be everything to everyone. And my concern was actually spreading myself too thin and then not truly making the impact that we're having in Tampa. And so we came up with this idea that we could actually sell our curriculum, because it is our own curriculum that we have developed, and it's very specific, and it allows the student to be peeled back like an onion so that by the time they leave us, they're whole and their core is whole. And came up with the idea that for $125,000 up front, a county could have our program and then pay us $25,000 a year to continue using our curriculum for 10 years. And after 10 years, it's yours. The $125,000 gives you all the nuts and bolts that you need to actually operate, and allows you to have someone come shadow us for 6 months to actually learn how we operate our program, learn our culture, and really understand how we work with the student. And then after that, we would have webinars to where we would teach you everything else you needed to learn. We are in the middle of negotiating that right now with Pasco County. They have actually said to us that they couldn't replicate our program for $125,000. It would take them a lot more to actually figure out how to do it. They would lose money in the process. And so we're in the middle of negotiating with them to be our first social enterprise. We are doing a pilot program in North Carolina that is one of our social enterprises, and they are paying us to actually do it, but they're not paying the upfront $125,000. They're just paying the $25,000 a year because we want to make sure that it does work away from us, and we have a partner that makes sense to do it there. And already have developed their board of directors, their superintendent, their mayor, and found a location for them to have a house. And the beauty of it is that not only are we ending homelessness in other counties by using our program, but it's an amazing way for us to actually sustain our own program.
Just a reflective question. When you scale up, what are the challenges you see in terms of quality of your output, and how do you control that? How do you try to maintain the same spirit that your faculty has? It's a constant challenge to balance between scaling up and keeping quality.
That is a very good question. We are lucky that we were just recently chosen to be in this program called Stand Together, which is a catalyst program where they take 15 organic nonprofits around the country and teach them how to scale appropriately by giving them all the tools they need to make sure that their culture stays intact. I think the most important point of our program is that the culture is very deep everywhere within all of my staff. No one ever has their phone off. We are available to our students 24/7. Their family, that's what family does. And that's embedded in the culture of our program. We have guiding principles that we have put into place, to where someone should be able to make a decision on their own based on our guiding principles. We are student-centric. Everything comes first and foremost to make sure that the student is safe, is stable, is happy, and that we are doing what's in the best interest of them at all times. It's not about us, it's always about them. And so I believe that between the Catalyst program and our culture that is so embedded, that we will be able to scale the program and maintain our quality. The big thing that I have impressed on North Carolina and will impress on Pasco is that quantity is not the answer. Quality is the answer. If we are not truly taking these students and making sure that they're reaching their end goal, then all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid on the problem. We're not a Band-Aid. We are a solution, which is a big difference. And we're fortunate that the University of South Florida launched a longitudinal study on our program 7 years ago. That's a 20-year study that actually follows these students, and the students that are outside of Tampa will be part of the study as well. So we will be able to track actual statistics of how the other programs are doing and how they mimic us. Our study with USF proves that not only do we end the cycle of generational poverty, but we change their somatic symptoms drastically as well. Everything from stomach, headache, to anger, to depression, to anxiety, to mental health is all vastly improved, and their hope scale goes up immensely. Because we have that measurement tool in place, I think it will be fairly easy to track who is actually truly doing our program and who is getting off the grid, and we would correct it very quickly.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm not sure how it works in this country, but do you get the support of the extended family, grandparents, uncles and aunts?
So usually by the time a student enters our program, their relationship with their family is pretty much deteriorated, and most of their aunts, uncles, or any extended family is either in jail, drugged out, not available, on the street themselves. And so no, we do not have that opportunity. I do believe, I'm a big believer, that you have one mom your whole life. And that if you don't have a relationship with your mom, that you really don't ever have peace. And so we do a boundaries class that teaches the kids how to have boundaries, appropriate words they can use so that it doesn't become a conflict, and actually rebuild a relationship with their parent. We tell them all the time, it may not be the fairy tale that you see on TV, but it will be enough that you will have peace. And the student who I was telling you about, who was living in, with no electricity and no plumbing, she now has a great relationship with her mother. And when you ask her why, she says that the program taught her that she had an expectation that her mother could not live up to. And that rather than having that expectation, she could just accept her mother for who she is. And for the fact that her mother didn't have the opportunity to go through the life skill classes that we are providing. And so rather than being angry at her mother, just accept her. She's doing the best she can. And it has changed the entire dynamic of their relationship. She could never go live back with her mom. Our kids can't go back and live there because they've now seen another side. But they do have peace because they do have a relationship with their family.
Vicky, can we just go for a little bit more? Okay, two. I have one question. So I have one request, and that is, I remember when we were there, you talked about boundaries and how important that was. And I think you alluded to that in your response to the last question. Can you just give more color on what you mean by boundaries, and that would be helpful, I think.
We do an entire boundaries curriculum because our kids have never, boundaries for them are very gray because they have seen a lot of abuse. So sometimes a boundary to them would be that it's okay to hit your spouse. It's okay to yell and scream because that's how you get your point across. It's okay to walk away or to slap someone. We teach them those are not boundaries. Those are not healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries are created by words, not actions. So for example, we do a class where we say, you're going to put a want ad in the newspaper for your mate. Write what that want ad looks like. Describe the person in your newspaper article that you are looking for. And then I read them what mine would be. And then they have time to actually write their want ad. As you go around the room and they're reading their want ad to you, you ask the question to them, is this the person you're with? Does your boyfriend or girlfriend look like this person? The answer is always no. But that's the ad that you wrote, so that's obviously who you're looking for. That's the very first part of boundary that we teach. You can't be getting something that you haven't actually set your own boundary for. The second thing is we teach them how to say what they're feeling with I statements. What happens is a lot of times there's blame and shame that goes in these families because they don't really know how to communicate. So rather than you did this, you made me, you told me, it's I statements. I feel X when you do X, and if you continue to do X, I will do X. So a perfect one is, I feel sad every time you tell me you're picking me up and you don't show up. And the next time we make plans, if you don't show up, I will no longer make plans with you. They're very specific boundaries, and we literally practice them over and over, where they write scenarios, they throw them in the middle of the room so nobody knows who said what. They're real things that they're struggling with. We open them up and we discuss how would you say this boundary statement so that you can stop the action that you no longer want without creating conflict. And it works. The boundaries class is amazing. We do it with friends, we do it with families, we do it with boyfriends. There's always aha moments for these kids as they're creating their boundaries, realizing that they're not in safe, healthy relationships. And all of a sudden that starts shifting.
You're doing incredible work. I'm just wondering, in the case of sexual abuse and rape, do you help these victims get justice through calling the authorities?
That's a really good question. So I look at that a little bit differently. The student has to be ready to actually go forward in telling, because a lot of times what happens is people push them. You need to tell, you need to get justice, you need to tell. That's a very difficult thing, and we have done it with a student to stand up on that witness stand, look your abuser or molester in the eye and say, they did this to me. We have done that with several students, but we first make sure that the students get counseling, which we do very specific counseling I'll tell you about in a second. Because if the student isn't really ready to do that, then all you're doing is you're getting justice for yourself. Because if the student isn't ready, that just makes them actually worse emotionally. And so it has to be at the student's pace, not your pace. And what we do is we first get the student to be whole. because that's really important, that the student is emotionally, physically, and mentally whole. And one of the things that we do is, depending on the reason that you're in our program, you get counseling very specific for that. If you had death of both parents, you're going to go to grief counseling. If you have had physical abuse, you're going to go to physical abuse counseling. If you have been molested, you're going to go to molestation counseling. However, on top of all of that, all of our kids go through what is called accelerated rapid treatment therapy. And it is a very specific therapy for PTSD. It was developed actually for the military, for people that came back with PTSD that were not able to assimilate back into society because their PTSD was so bad. And we are fortunate that we are in a study to see if this therapy can actually come out to the main population of the United States. We find it is absolutely life-changing for our kids. What they have found, what the research shows, is that when you have been traumatized, you do not go into the same sleep pattern as someone who has not been traumatized. And this therapy can actually reprogram your brain to enable you, A, to sleep, but B, to get the image of the actual trauma out of your head. So, for example, we have, all of our girls have been through it, but we have a student who can tell you she was molested by her stepfather since she's been 7 years old. And that went on for years and years and years until she finally just left the house because she couldn't take it anymore. And she literally could pull up, as she was getting into bed every night, the image of her father walking in that room and molesting her. So she wasn't sleeping because she was so afraid to close her eyes, knowing that he could walk in the room and molest her. She went through the therapy, and what the therapy did for her is she can remember that she was molested. There's no question. She can't pull up the image again. And so it changed everything for her. It enables her to sleep. It enables her to function. She's no longer afraid. She's not looking over her shoulder, waiting for him to come attack her. It's amazing. And so the student, after they go through that, we may ask them, would you like to go ahead and, put charges against your dad or your uncle or your stepdad, whoever it is? A lot of times they don't want to do that. They just want to move on. And so it has already been reported before they ever tell us. They have definitely told someone and it's been reported, but an investigation has shown that there was not enough evidence to actually go to court. To answer that question too, we did have one student 2 years ago who entered our program. The father had been molesting her every morning before school. The mom worked days, the dad worked nights. It was her own dad, which we see quite often. And he would wake her up every morning, molest her, and then get her dressed for kindergarten, send her off to school. This went on until she was 16 years old. She finally confided in her boyfriend and made her boyfriend swear he would not tell anyone. And he did. He told his parents. And that day that he told his parents, the police knocked on his door. He had raped her that morning. They did a rape kit, confirmed it without a question that he had been molesting her. They immediately took him out of the house. The way DCF works here is that once the perpetrator is out of the house is safe, is the way they consider it. Well, the mom came home from work that afternoon. The police were there still doing the investigation. They told the mom what happened. And when the police left, the mom turned to the daughter and said, "You've been sleeping with my husband. Get out." 17 years old, nowhere to go. She tells her school social worker what happened, and we end up taking her into our program. The mom will not talk to her. She's cut off all ties to her siblings, which was very hard. So not only did this girl lose her stability, she lost her entire family. And while in our program, testified against her father and put him in jail for life.
Thank you, Vicky. Do you want to stay on and listen to the other presentations? There are some amazing.
I would love to. I have to get to another meeting. I told them I was running. I actually emailed them and said we're running late, so I won't be there till 11:30. So I'm going to hop off, but I appreciate the opportunity. If anyone has any questions, they're more than welcome to email me.
Okay.
And, you know, thank you and Margaret for allowing me to be part of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.